Hi, my name is Melina and welcome back to my channel. Today, for the second time, because the first footage did not work, I am talking about Waiting for Godot. Thank you very much to Felix for recommending this book to me. I really appreciated the French level was perfect for me, so it was honestly a great read. Samuel Beckett was an author, a critic, and a playwright, and his play Waiting for Godot is one of the more thought-provoking pieces I've read so far in the short period that I've been alive, and indeed, Waiting for Godot. Beckett was born in 1906 Ireland and died in 1889 France. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1969 for his writing, which in new forms of the novel and the drama in the destitution of modern man acquires its elevation. End of quote. From 1923 to 1927 at Trinity College in Dublin, he studied vigorously and received a bachelor's degree in Romance languages. No, that doesn't mean flirting. These are languages derived from Latin, Spanish, Italian, French, that kind of family. Beckett wrote in perfect English and perfect French, so it's honestly just a fantastic experience because you can read both, and they will have the distinct Beckett quality. And I'm not devaluing the works of translators. Honestly, translations are great because you get to read books that you wouldn't normally be able to read. It's just a really different feeling because when you read translations, it is a lot of the translator's voice in there, of course. So Beckett gives you the opportunity to really immerse yourself in both. Anyway, after finishing college, he taught for a while and then decided to become an English reader in Paris at the École Normale Supérieure, where he met the other very famous Irish author who wrote a book that's considered to be one of the hardest. Yep, James Joyce. Will I eventually read Ulysses? The question that no one asks, but everyone wants to know the answer to when you say that you like books. The answer to that is I will, but eventually when I have the time to properly sit down and devote myself to it. So anyway, Beckett joined James Joyce Literary Circle. He stayed there for a while, but then he traveled back to back to Ireland and back to Paris. He traveled back and forth like a lot. I won't go into those details, but he was in Paris when it became occupied. He was there and he was allowed to stay because Ireland was technically a neutral country, so he wasn't kicked out or worse, persecuted as people from other countries were. But he did join the underground resistance, so he still kind of put himself into danger. After the occupation, he left and then he came back again, and between 46 to 50, it was one of his most creative periods. He wrote Mallows, Malone Dies, and Waiting for Godot. He had difficulty finding publishers, but his future wife, oh my god, so romantic, convinced a publisher to publish Mallows, and guess what? That was a success, so the publisher came back for more. Beckett's approach to writing was very go away from people. He liked to distance himself, to completely devote himself to his craft. So when he was awarded his Nobel Prize, he accepted it, but he chose not to go and to perform his speech because that would have meant going out and addressing people. His last major work, Stirring Still, was published in 1986, and sadly he became ill, and so in 1989 he became hospitalized and died in December, only a few months after his wife did in July. The play follows Vladimir and Esther who wait beside a tree for a man called Godot. They spend hours engaged in amicable dialogue, waiting, filling the time, and then suddenly someone comes along. And so they ask him, "Are you Godot?" And he replies, "No, I'm Pozo, and this is Lucky." And Lucky is described with very animalistic properties. He has a rope around his neck, he doesn't talk, he's treated kind of like a dog, but the audience knows that he's a slave. It is quite strange to see that Lucky and Pozo are coming from somewhere. They have a life. Somewhere there are laws about slave owning, and here you have those two who before this seem to be the only people who we know exist other than Godot. With this interaction, it's revealed that they don't know what Godot looks like, and yet they're so dedicated to see this friend. They spend a while with Lucky and Pozo, but it's quite hard to see the passage of time. We merely know that it is still one day, since there are two acts, and we know that we are waiting, and Godot still hasn't shown up. Lucky has this fit, this moment when he suddenly stands up and talks and bursts into this long monologue that sounds completely absurd. It's a complicated monologue about everything, but yet he says nothing. And at the end, he just wears himself thin. And I think that's because he comes to an important realization about life, a question that we as the audience and Didi and Gogo, which by the way are the nicknames the two have for each other, I just think that's adorable. And we cannot come to that realization yet. And so when Lucky does that, he collapses and he cannot get up. And so what follows is a little bit of a comical scene that's kind of funny but mostly sad of Pozo and Vladimir and Estragon trying to get Lucky up, but he just won't get up. He keeps collapsing, and I think it's because he thought of everything that he cannot think of anything anymore, and because he cannot think of anything at all, this is why he has collapsed. This is why he cannot exist at the moment. And I think it's not a stretch to say that this is perhaps a little bit of a focus on René Descartes' idea before Beckett, because Beckett did speak out about René Descartes' idea of cogito ergo sum, or je pense donc je suis, I think therefore I am. Eventually a boy comes and he says that Godot cannot. So the next day Vladimir and Estragon meet again, same place, same time, and in the evening the same boy comes. Vladimir asks, "Do you know us?" But the boy does not, or is he pretending not to, since the audience can see it as the same one. But the play ends with them agreeing to go and not moving. That's a very famous last line, they do not move. I have work to do. She does not move. It's funny in the context of procrastination, I guess, especially if you're a student and your whole life is based on stretching out, on doing homework as much as you possibly can. In the context of life, it's a heavy thing to think about. This we cannot help but wait. This we cannot help but move. We are kind of stuck, as we'll talk about that later. And throughout this play, it's quite an amusing one because it's made out of those little tiny elements, that dialogue between the characters, that banter, the taking off the shoe scene. It's funny, and I enjoy this play because it makes this whole question of confronting your existence a little bit more palatable. It doesn't throw you into the metaphorical deep end. It goes slowly in how it lowers you to discomfort. And so by doing that, it makes it a lot easier for the reader to think about their own answers to the questions, to rethink some certain parts of their life. Because it's not just like a play where it's like, oh, and by the way, you know, maybe your life has no meaning and everything is pointless and oh, goodbye. By prompting the reader to do this in a slow way, for the reader, this is an enjoyable evening by watching the play or reading the play. It's fun, you know? And then they slowly come to this realization until they realize that they cannot stop and they're already there. So it's not something that they can escape or push away. It's because this play is such an amusing one and such a light one at first that you can engage with it. And I think that plays like this that are not so heavy, they make it, because they make it easier for the reader to process it, they also make it easier to approach this difficult task of questioning. And Beckett famously said, "Why people have to complicate a thing so simple I can't make out," about the play. And as usual, we're analyzing everything. I'm wondering if, because the dialogue is part of it, that Beckett is actually trying to imply that it's not the life, it's not the setting, because it's literally grayness around them that gives life meaning, but it's the interactions that you have with people. And I could argue that it's actually because Didi and Gogo, they don't discuss their plight, that they cannot get out of it in a way. Maybe that is the message that we can look into, since it's them that give this play the vibrancy that it has. And I can hear you be like, what do you mean they don't talk about it? Of course they talk about waiting. It's a 2-hour play. If they don't talk about waiting, what do they talk about? Well, life. What I mean here is the conversations that they have, they're very surface level. It's very, let's talk about the necessity of waiting and the pointlessness of waiting, but still we're not moving. Yes, we're not moving. Should we go? Yes, we should go. Yes, we do not move. It's very admitting that they're doing it, but not really having an in-depth productive discussion on why exactly they're not doing something. It's more like we're waiting. We're waiting because we're waiting. We're waiting because we're already here. It's just some kind of pointless surface level, and that's perhaps because they don't really want to admit that they don't know what they're doing here. Perhaps that's because of that. But I guess if they really took the time to question themselves and why they're spending time on this and why it's important for them and why they cannot just let life go, maybe they wouldn't be here. But the issue is that they cannot talk about it. And so it's essentially a loop. It's essentially a pointless situation because they need to talk about it, but they cannot talk about it because of the nature of the situation. But their plight isn't directly stated. It isn't like, it's such a problem that we're waiting. And through this being there, through this becoming normal because all we do is wait as they do over the course of 2 hours, it just becomes something that's there, that's part of the performance, that's considered normal, that we're used to the idea already. And so it becomes life for us as well as the characters. And I have to say, at the beginning of the play, I fully registered that there was a tree. That's literally what I started my summary with. There is a tree, they're waiting beside a tree. But over the course of the play, it really just faded away. I only focused back on the tree at certain moments in time. But to me, when I was reading it, it was mainly the characters who grabbed my attention, and it's the thoughts that they provoked that flew in my head. And I think that's why I enjoyed this work as much as I did, because I thought that Beckett was so talented for making me so engaged with the play. Because normally when I read, why do I not have a single book here? This is embarrassing. Physics textbook. Normally when I read, I look for subplots, I look for the development of characters, I look for great writing, I look for all of those things that really make a story pop, that make it complicated, that make it layered. Fun for me to analyze and actively engage with the text. And then here, I am literally absorbed in reading about two people waiting. And if I said that to some of my classmates, they would be like, but Polina, don't you love fantasy? Don't you love thrillers? How can you go on after that and read something like this? And I think that's part of Beckett's talent, this allowing for the reader to have the freedom to leave, but the reader just cannot leave because they're that absorbed in the text. So that's one of my key points. It provokes you with its simplicity. It's not all of that other surface level stuff that matters. Sometimes it's just the characters and the things that it makes you talk about. And from there on, you can go one step further. Instead of thinking it as two characters who are having a dialogue about Waiting for Godot, because we're talking about the pointlessness that people's minds trap them in, even when they realize something they cannot move, or they, on the contrary, deny it and yet they cannot move. And it's us, the audience, being stuck there watching them unable to leave, even though we technically have the freedom to. So if we're discussing the workings of the mind and how this all has an impact of how you watch and you take in the play, let's say that, then what if this is all inside your head? Which pill do you choose, Neo? Do you believe that the rest of the world exists now after seeing them have this crisis in only a small part of an area where there's quite literally nothing except for a single tree that you forget for half of the play? And that makes sense to me, this other version that I had when reading about this, because this strange thoughts, these imaginings, they love to manifest in boredom. They love to start and grow from a seed that's already there, from a single moment of interaction that you've had before in your life, when you're not focused on specifically something. When you're bored, let's say, when your mind is more flexible, more open to thinking about those things and driving yourself into a loop about it. This acceptance of realizing that they're going to wait at the end when they do not move still, but this rationality that's telling them that they should move. It's been a full day. They don't even know what this guy looks like, and yet they're still waiting for him. It's not they, it's kind of you. It's how you think about this play and how they think about life. Joking with yourself, trying to help yourself, falling into a loop of everything, really. Maybe you're denying this right now and you're like, hey, this isn't my own head, I don't think like this. Or maybe you're accepting this and you're saying, well, maybe this is my own head, but still you continue on with your life no matter what your path is, the so-called way that you go on, knowing all of this, or perhaps not knowing all this but still consciously registering it. These lines between you and the actors, I'm talking in the context of watching the play, they blur. So it's not really about them and about watching the play. It's kind of about you if you're thinking about this. And it's not only because of seeing you and yourself and the actions of the actors in the play, because for everyone that's different, but it's also the ambiguity of Beckett's words. What is this whole idea of simple? It's scary how similar you become to the characters, because they are also in an actual physical loop that they can't leave. I think we recognize that as the audience. They're stuck in their decisions, and we kind of get stuck into a loop as well, because we can't just not think about this whole thing. We can't just not think about these big questions, because that's what they're doing, and they're stuck, aren't they? It's really complicated, and many refer to the characters as being in an extreme situation, but for me it's not really so much as an extreme situation as much as just life, stripped away of all the layers of superficial things that we all see in daily life. We have little pretty layers that we put between ourselves and the characters, those little shields that stop us from actively questioning all that we know, because we just go like, it's a play, or I'll think about it later. And it's normal for us to do it. That's what we've been doing for the majority of our lives, I guess, in a way. Not in something as serious as this, but in minor things like, oh, I'll just postpone thinking about this one thing for later. It's a normal part of the human experience. But for these characters, they don't have that choice because they are actively forced to be in that situation. I think that if you're falling from high above, you start to think about life much more because you do not have the choice of not thinking about it, since you are scared and you know that you will likely die if it's from a great height. They can still choose to deny it, as you can say that they do, but they have to be present in that situation. And by watching them as the audience, by giving them an audience, I feel like we're kind of trapping them in a way. And if they're us, then who is trapping us? Ourselves, or is it life? The issue is that we are not actually waiting, even though I am just comparing ourselves to also be waiting for something. We are waiting, but on the surface we are not actually physically waiting. We're not sitting there watching paint dry. We're running around trying to cram as many things as we can into our short mortal lives. That's some cheerful content from Paulina today. Is it acceptance of knowing that you're going to die and just moving on with life and doing whatever you do, but just not actively thinking about it? Or is it denial because you refuse to acknowledge this and you keep going? What's trapping you? And I think this play is also a reminder to keep questioning and reconsidering whether some things are just futile, because the characters are waiting. Their life, the stage for us, is empty. They're waiting for Godot to fill the stage with his presence, but he's not showing up. And yet they're determined to see it through. Maybe from this we can kind of take away the message that we don't have to see everything through, because not everything can be seen through. The issue here is that we as the audience, for us the play ends, for them it keeps going. We do not know if they eventually do meet Godot. So we can't just break all of our promises, because then who would we be? The whole world would probably just collapse, I guess. It's a balance to manage, and yet another reminder that life has a different idea from you. And I think this could very well be the new idea of, are you a glass half full, glass half empty person? Do you think it's acceptance the way we're living, or do you think it's denial? Nobody knows what the characters do when they're not waiting for Godot. You could argue the whole of life happens. They're still waiting as they were at the beginning of the play. They have not moved in a physical sense. Now that we've talked about the absolute mess that I'm in over this play, let's talk about some alternate interpretations, a little bit about the characters, and the hat, of course the hat. Lucky collapses without the hat. And yet it's not his head, it's not a necessity, it's not a thing that he needs for him to carry on living. It's not oxygen, it's not water. And yet he thinks that he needs it, and so he does need it. Maybe it's a strange alternate world where the bowler hat is a law for survival. I mean, let's not question the fabric of the world, because that's a whole different direction. And so we place so much value on life and not wasting our precious time. We talk about it a lot, right? And I guess for Didi and for Gogo, Godot is their hat. All that we know is that they're waiting for Godot and that they have bowler hats. But Lucky and Pozo, they're not waiting for Godot and they have bowler hats. So is the only rule wearing a bowler hat? So if for Lucky, his necessity is a bowler hat, and you can disagree on whether it's the first layer of the pyramid, whether it's actually a means of survival, but whether he is a need or a want, we know that they depend on him and they are ready to spend their whole life waiting for him. People see these characters as everything, and perhaps one of the strangest, far from the truth interpretations for me, is the idea that actually Vladimir and Estragon are both gay. And people think that because there is not a reference to women, and there are a lot of things that you can interpret as being sexual allusions, and so by bickering they're kind of like a married couple on a weird honeymoon type thing. And I think that with plays like this, there's not really one correct interpretation, so especially because this interpretation does have some valid points. I do not want to dismiss it just because I personally don't agree with it. But the reason that I think this is quite far from the truth is, well, because I mean, they're waiting for Godot. What are they waiting for? You could argue that Godot is society's approval and you can take a certain loop, but I also feel like you could justify pretty much anything in literature as long as you prove it. Knowing that Beckett said that he was kind of against interpretations that were further from the text, so for example, there was a women's troupe of actors who wanted to put the play on, and he kind of complained about it. He was like, you're not men, you shouldn't put the play on. There's all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking he would have probably been not so happy with this interpretation of his characters. Another interpretation that I find far more likely is that they are both survivors of the apocalypse, but then again, that does not quite make sense to me because, well, Lucky and Pozo are coming from somewhere, and you could be like, hey, maybe it's Godot sending them again, but then where is Godot? Where are these people coming from? We know that Vladimir and Esther technically have houses. They can go back to that. Maybe it isn't just a state of nothing. Far more likely, it is that psychedelic state in your mind type of thing. Another interpretation is old ladies bickering. Again, kind of skeptical because it's just such a deeply existential work for me. I'll talk about why later. That it just seems unlikely that Beckett would spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of serious topics onto complaining about two old women sitting on a bench outside of his home. So for me, I view this as being much more simple. I don't think they themselves are a metaphor for something. I think their existence, it's a metaphor for our actions and how we view life and something to get you thinking about stuff. But they themselves are nothing other than perhaps tools to serve a purpose to make us reflect onto our own behavior. Existentialists believe that there are important questions for every human to answer. Questions such as, what if maybe life doesn't have meaning? What is our purpose? And the thing about this play is it's very focused on how you think about something. So if you do not see these issues, if you do not feel that the need to ask yourself what your purpose in life is to be worth your time, then you will not see the same things as other people will from this play. Why is that different from works such as, for example, The Handmaid's Tale? I mean, everyone has different interpretations to that, of course, but it follows a central theme. It's about women and how our society treats them and what perhaps the solution is to this alternate dystopian society. It raises questions like, are we moving towards that? It's sort of a guided thing, but with this loose, extremely short play that you don't know anything about, so that you're not sure of anything other than what other people see this as and what Beckett has vaguely stated about it, it's really onto you to decide how you view it. Okay, final bit, blow your mind. I have a teacher who's from Ireland. That's not the shocking part. The shocking part is I asked him, and I was like, what does Godot mean? And after him being like, you mean Godot? And me being like, sure, Godot, what does that mean? And him being like, Godot, which to me literally sounds like the exact same thing because I don't speak Irish, but okay. He was like, it means forever, which adds a whole entire new dimension to this play. Because are they waiting for forever or are they waiting forever? Who are they waiting for? And what is eternal but death? So is this really that much darker than we initially thought? Are they technically waiting for death? Is there one true enemy, death? And so then it is really just as simple as deciding what the purpose of life is, knowing that they're waiting for death and yet death keeps delaying their meeting? This raises a whole lot of questions and I don't think you can answer them. You can speculate on what the correct option is, as I did with stating why I don't necessarily agree with this interpretation of it's the apocalypse or they're gay. Why I do see this as just two people waiting. I'll let you decide. Thank you very much for watching this video. I know it's been a mix of everything kind of, so I don't quite know which playlist to sort this into. I hope my video provoked you to think about stuff. And I want to end with one final message other than a thank you to Felix one more time. It's this: do not wait for Godot. Go and read Waiting for Godot.